whether it's really better, having your own business and how it's like to start up your own business. And that is why I'm very excited for our next speaker, Mr. Robin, who had experience working at corporates and currently has been building his own startup for 2 years. He'll be sharing with us his take on creating a startup. So can we have a round of applause as I invite Mr. Robin up on stage.
Hi everybody, thank you for joining. I'm actually going to talk a little bit about something else first, but indeed I do run a startup, which I've been building for 2 years. We have an intern from NUS, he does IT. I asked him what would be most interesting for most students here to talk about. So I'll first talk about what's the difference between working for a corporate and working for a startup, since I did both. Do interrupt me anytime you like, if you have questions, if I'm too quick, if I'm too short or whatever. I will just be trying to share my experiences and follow up on them. So my name is Robin. As you can probably tell, I'm not Singaporean. I moved here 2.5 years ago from the Netherlands. I'm 41 years of age and I used to live in Zaandam and Haarlem before I moved here, which are two cities close to Amsterdam, which you might have heard of. I started traveling when I was 13. I did my first trip to the south of France on my own by train. And since then I got hooked on traveling. So since then I've been going to Latin America, US, all over Europe. And in 1997 I went on a trip to China and I got very fascinated by Asia. So I decided I wanted to live there one day. So I did that 2.5 years ago, coming here to Singapore. And then I had to choose, do I continue my corporate career or do I start my own? So before I got here, back home in the Netherlands, I started my career at Accenture. Who has heard of Accenture? They're the biggest IT integrator in the world, I think next to IBM. I worked there for 3 years as an analyst. Then from there I went into management consulting at a company called DCE, which is part of a large corporate called Altra. And before I moved here, I worked at ING Bank, which you might have heard of. We used to sponsor Formula One a long time ago. So when I got here, I set up my own company, and it's very different. It's different in a lot of aspects, which I will describe. So, first of all, what's the difference in terms of kind of work that you will do for content? If you work in a corporate, you will become a specialist most of the time. Not right away from the start, but in the longer run. For example, when I worked at ING, we used to have, well, they still have, of course, they have a marketing department only for the Netherlands, which is about 40 people big. Which means they have somebody running Instagram, somebody making designs for the marketing, somebody making brochures, somebody just working on the text for one product, etc., etc., etc. So you can become really, really good at one thing within the marketing area. So now back to Investor, to my own company. The girl filming there is Rukshika. She is our marketing department. And she does everything for us. Which means running 4 different websites that we do, making the flyers that we just got, making sure that we do SEO, so search engine optimization. And that's if she gets to work only on the marketing part. Because at the moment we're rolling out a new version, so she needs to test also. If we need to move around stuff or stuff needs to be bought, she will pick that up as well. And this is an improvement because before she joined in October, I was doing all that stuff. So I was doing it even more in general, and really crappy, by the way. So it's a very big difference for your further career. Do you want to get really, really good at something? If you're an engineer or a developer, if you want to really go into depth into Java or any kind of language, it's good to work at a big company because you will get really good at it. But you probably won't be doing much else. If you want to work at a startup, you will probably be working with 15 different languages. You will not get great at any of them. but you will know a little bit about all of them. Structured versus flexible. If a big company needs to do things, it needs to be very structured. There needs to be rules. There's a lot of management. For example, if you work at a company like I worked at ING, we had 13,000 people in the Netherlands alone. That means that the CEO has probably about 10 managers that he manages directly. They have another 10 managers, and they have another 10 managers, and they have a team of probably 20, 30, 40, 50 people. So there's a lot of structure and there's a lot of regulation about who can decide what. There's policies on what you can and definitely also cannot do. There's structures about what type of letters you can use when you write a letter. There's rules about what color code the marketing has to be, etc., etc., etc. And you have to, because if you don't, the brand ING, for example, gets scrambled really quick if everybody does their own thing. So it's structured, and it can be very nice if that's what you like. If you like to work in a structured environment, get a lot of guidance, that's a good way to start. Then a startup, on the other hand, it's totally different. I'm pretty sure we don't have any rules that I very much enforce, other than that everybody needs to take responsibility for their job. In day-to-day life, we switch all the time. So today we're here, which means that we're not working on a lot of other stuff that we need to do. Then tomorrow we'll probably be testing the new version that's coming up. And then on Wednesday we'll probably try to work our way through the resumes we got and the emails, etc., etc. And I sincerely have no clue what I will be doing in 2 weeks from now, let alone 3 months from now. Of course, when we get bigger and bigger, that becomes a little bit better. So I wrote the HR manual now, which I can use to hire people, so if somebody takes that over at some point, there's some kind of structure. But it means that for yourself, you have to like that. If you prefer somebody to just give you orders, do this, this, and this, there's very few startups that are for you. Large versus small. It's quite obvious, of course, that the corporate is big. It's quite obvious that most startups are fairly small, even Carousel. Who of you know Carousel by name? They're still, structure-wise, very small. I think they have about 120 staff at the moment. That's big for a startup, but it's small compared to DBS or any of the global brands. What's maybe not so nice about being big, that everything takes a lot of time and a lot of coordination. So, for example, in the first year I worked at ING, I built a new savings product. So, I guess you all have a savings account, maybe at DBS or OCBC or whatever. I built something similar for the bank back home in the Netherlands. So when I was doing that, I had 60 staff working on that, almost full time. We spent 3 million euros, so about 4.5 Sing, to build that product. It took us 15 months to do so. That probably sounds very inefficient, very slow, maybe not that smart. But then the upside, once we were ready and we launched in March, I think 2013, if I remember correctly, within 3 weeks we accumulated 6 billion euros of savings. Because ING is the biggest bank in the Netherlands and we have 7 million customers there. So once the money starts rolling in, it rolls in fast. Now back to us. We have 5 paying customers at this moment. The first one we got half of December. 5 might not seem much, but we've been working up to this point for a long time. We are very on top of any of our customers because we don't have many yet. And we try to do as much as we can for them. And we make a loss on all of them. And it will probably stay like that for quite some time. Because while we help our customers, we also figure out what is it that they want exactly. I mean, of course, we have an idea of what they want and why they came to us, but we try to tweak it all the time. Because our product is not that well known and that that well tweaked and that well developed that everybody who comes to us understands right away, oh, this is investor, they do this. So we need to adapt to the customer all the time. So small is nice in the sense of flexibility, and it's nice in the sense of learning, but making money just takes a long time. We can, if you have a wish tomorrow and you become a customer, we can implement it the next day, or maybe even the same day. But as a business, it just takes a long time to actually get to those volumes. Also team-wise, you're very close on top of each other. I'm the CEO, but you wouldn't be able to tell probably when we have team meeting. We have team meetings on Friday, we sit together and everybody basically brings in their own points about what they think is important at that moment. So it's very close together. We don't do like separate meetings about topics, etc., because there's no need for that kind of overhead. Then benefits versus a dream. I've been long enough in Singapore that benefits are a very important part for career choices here. I think it's quite obvious that if you really look for something which will make you a lot of money, especially in the short run, it's most likely better to go to bigger companies. They're just able to afford more, but it will be mainly in terms of money, maybe holidays, maybe insurance, things like that. In a startup, it's, at least to me, it's unacceptable if you don't buy into what the company actually does. So people who want to join us, if they don't like what we do, we're a startup builder. If you don't have any intention of ever wanting to understanding that or wanting to work on that, you just want to have a salary, please don't leave your resume. For a startup, everybody needs to be wanting to work towards the end goal, which is far away. In our case, we'll probably start making real money in 2 or 3 years from now. Until then, we'll have to try and to iterate and to improve, etc., etc. And it can be very frustrating because sometimes we work on something for 2 or 3 months, and then it turns out nobody likes it, and that's not always that nice. And we get better at it, so that's why we grow and we become more successful. But if you only join because of the money, you will probably not stay, because it just becomes frustrating if your work gets scrapped and you need to start over. So it's important for people that they understand what the business is about in case of a startup, that you buy into the dream. Very often you get paid in stock options as well, next to your salary, which basically also means that you have a share in the company. If your company does well, that might make you rich in the long run. If the company doesn't do well, it's going to be zero. So you basically need to be wanting to invest in that sense. Culture. Does anybody know what the picture on the right side is? Has anybody ever seen the Silicon Valley show? Okay. It's not that far from the truth. So, like I said at the start, corporates are more structured, there's more regulation, there's more rules, there's more management, etc., etc. Something else that is also that typically people at large companies will be slightly older. They have a very different lifestyle. They probably have kids, so they want to go home at some point. They have a different way of dressing. I actually dressed up today. Usually I wear shorts and stuff. At startups, you typically don't have any of that. In our case, for example, we work in our co-work space usually 2 days a week, sometimes 3 days a week, when we need to work together. The rest of the time, we don't really care where everybody is. We're on WhatsApp, on Messenger, on email, or whatever if we need to coordinate. Some people work in the deep of the night. Our senior developer likes to fix stuff at 3 o'clock in AM, which is fine. So there's very little structure in that sense. Again, if you don't think that way, it's probably not for you because you might feel very lost. So there's a big difference in culture. Again, depends what's for you. So those are differences between, which I think are the main differences between working for a corporate and working for a startup. Why I told you this, some people think that I have to go for a startup because it's cool, or I have to go for a corporate because it's better for my career. As I told you at the start, I switched over and over. I actually studied public policy and public administration, so I was supposed to work for the government, which I never did. My main tip to you, make sure that you work somewhere where you, first of all, like it, but also where you learn a lot, especially when you're young. That's way more important than thinking about where you want to be in 10 years from now. Make sure that you, I'm not sure who said that, but there's a famous quote which says, make sure you're not the smartest person in the room, because if you're not, you will learn from everybody around you, and especially at this age, that's what I would prefer you to do. And by the time you're 40, you're getting old like me, you will make the big bucks, and you will have figured out what exactly it is you want to get great at. This is the part of the talk that I prepared. I can still talk more about building up a startup, but then just ask me a question about it.
How do you ensure how do you ensure stability when you start a startup? Because when you said that the money it's not in, but then let's say you have a family, you have someone to feed. So how do you ensure that you get what's enough?
You mean for the employees or for the company?
For the company, for yourself, for everyone in general.
Okay. So first, for the company, there is no stability. Maybe how we got here. Has anybody heard of the term pivoting? It basically means that. Let me give an example how that went for us. My company, Investor, I pitched it at Startup Weekend the first time. And when I did so, we were building an online financial planner, which helps you to set up your mortgage or your retirement plan. We built a fancy app, it worked great, people liked it, they downloaded it. There was only one issue. Nobody wanted to pay for it. If you're a business, that's a big problem. So then we had to pivot, which means that we had to think, okay, a pivot literally means doing this and then go this way. So you try to keep a few of the things that you were doing in the past. In our case, we kept the financial advice that we still do, but all of the rest we changed. So we don't do retail customers anymore, we now focus on businesses, and we help other startups with their finances. We do that now all the time, the pivoting. So every 6 weeks or every 8 weeks, we look at our business. What did we learn in the past 6 or 8 weeks? Did it go well? If it didn't go well, then we have to change. If it did go well, then we proceed on the direction that we took. So after we switched from retail to B2B, we pivoted about 5 times. This is not a fun experience. I'm telling it with a smile, but I really wish we could just go to the goal directly. And we've been stable since August, because then users started picking up, people gave more feedback, etc. At any point in the past 2 years, we could have quit the business because we didn't have enough customers, we ran out of cash, I couldn't find the employees that I needed, etc., etc. So, long story short, startup life is very day-to-day. Maybe not day-to-day, but definitely month-to-month. In startup life, you have something called cash burn. Usually you spend way more money than you are getting in, which means that at some point you run out. That typically is the end of the company. If you run out before you find the customers, that's it also. You can try to spend less, which means firing people or not hiring them in the first place. So there's a lot of ways you can go out of business. What does that mean as an employee? You have to buy into that. That's kind of what I tried to tell you before also, benefits versus a dream. If you're looking for a stable job that you will have in 5 years, don't join a startup. It's as simple as that. And any startup, by the way. It might seem to you that Grab is a stable startup, They burn cash like wood, but they have never made profit, which means at some point, if they don't get more money in, as the investors are willing to put back in, they will burn up just as quick as we will. Then again, from a personal perspective, you were asking about families. Well, first of all, if you're, I'm kind of assuming when you study here you don't have families yet, maybe soon. If you ever want to try something like this and want to take a risk in your job, this is the moment to actually do it. Because typically you shouldn't have that much to lose yet. Probably in 15 years from now, when your kids want to go to school and you have to feed them, and your wife wants you to get a condo and things like that, it might become a different story. But if you want to try how it is, after university is the best moment to do it.
Thank you.
More questions?
Thank you. How do you raise money, especially for foreigners in Singapore?
Sorry.
Raise your money, you get your money, especially for
How we raise?
yeah.
For me personally, or
Yeah.
okay. There's two things. So we have been bootstrapping so far. We have now raised funds as of March, so that's why we're also trying to hire more people. So please come to the booth or to me later on. Typically for startups, there's three ways to get money. There's government grants, which there are a lot in Singapore. If you're local, you're very often eligible for one of them. So that's one good way. Then for startups, usually loans are not an option. For other companies, you can get business loans, but if you don't have assets or machines, that doesn't work. And the main way to get your company funded is by raising equity, which means selling shares and getting money in return, so investment. You were asking about being a foreigner. That doesn't really make any difference in the sense, if you want to get investors in, they will not care where you come from, they will care if your business makes sense. And yeah, I don't think that's related to being a foreigner or not.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
No? Oh yeah, sure. How much to pay myself? Okay, I haven't been paid since I started this. I've been paying everybody else from my savings. That's another reason why the salaries in a startup will not be as much as in a corporate, because we'll just burn up my savings quicker. And this is quite normal, by the way. There's research by SMU. About 85% of startups are first getting funded by people's own money, then by money from their family or relatives, and only then they start getting external investors. So a lot of founders, when they start, they really have a lot invested in that. So they're simply not able to pay top dollar for people they hire. I'm starting to pay myself now as of March, but very minimal. Most of the money I will get in my paycheck, I will funnel back into the company, because it will make sure that we can stay in existence longer. So I assume that at some point this will become a very big and successful company, and then it will come back to me. I saw that my time is up. Please do come to me if you have more questions. I have a whole stack of business cards. I'm happy to explain more, and thank you for your attention.